And we are live. Awesome. So today I am joined by someone who has known me my entire life. He's my uncle cousin because he's my cousin, but he's my uncle. This is Lieutenant Colonel Terry Coney, retired of the United States Air Force. Terry, why don't you share a little bit about yourself with our audience as they join in?
Okay, as Julie said, she's my niece cousin, and the only reason she really does that because we have a little difference in age there. My mother's youngest brother, he waited a little while before he had kids, but either way, we have known each other for a long time. Uh, Came to my house, hung out with my kids, but we're both just kids from Lakeland, Florida. As we say, kids from down the hill or Simpson Park. I actually grew up in Lakeland, finished high school in Lakeland at a segregated high school, which was Rochelle High School. Uh, there was only African American and Black high school in Lakeland at the time. Uh, Left and went to Tallahassee to Florida A&M University. Graduated in 1972, and during that time we had the Vietnam War going on, and there was there was doing a military draft. So just like you have lotteries to win money now, there was a lottery based on your birthday, whether you would get drafted or not. And I had a very low number, 68. And 2 weeks after I graduated from college, I thought I had a college who no, just
Terry, you breaking up.
recruiter took all the tests, and lo and behold, I passed. I got selected for navigator training. Probably one of the reasons I didn't have 20/20 visions. That's what it takes to get into past initial physical qualifications to get in flight training, which I guess that's kind of ironic since we're going to be talking about the Tuskegee Airmen shortly. But navigator is actually on the plane. I end up, after going through all my flight training, I got selected to uh, be on the B-52 bomber crew. And I had operational flying bases in Eastern North Carolina, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Goldsboro, North Carolina. I went northern Michigan, uh, in the Upper Peninsula, Michigan, near Marquette, Michigan, base called Cass Sawyer. Then went to California as a flight instructor, academic instructors, simulators, that kind of thing, and navigation. And when I left there, I was transitioning to leave aviation to go to security. I was the chief of the navigator and bombing division for combat training school at Castle Air Force Base in Northern California. So I made a transition from aviation to security, became a squadron commander. My first unit was a missile security squadron. We were responsible for escorting missile warheads back and forth to a missile complex where they actually had the missiles. We were responsible for if the on-site security system went down, where the people at the large site couldn't monitor the security of the missile. We had to post two guards on the site. So I did 4 years at Grand Forks Air Force Base. When I left there, uh, I went there as a major. I got promoted to lieutenant colonel. I was the deputy group commander. I think we had all total about 1,100 security personnel on that base. So I left there in 1991. About 3 months, 4 months after the end of Desert Storm, I went to Guam, uh, which is a U.S. territory out in the Western Pacific, and I was the chief of security police there. Spent 15 months there. Probably one of the major things that happened while I was there, other than dealing with a typhoon, you actually had a volcano erupt at Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, which was right at the foot of Mount Pinatubo, a mountain, an inactive volcano that hadn't erupted in over 500 years, but it chose to erupt in the summer of 1991, end up evacuating over 20,000 DOD and civilian personnel through Anderson, helping them getting back to the States. And it was really the first time I'd seen people in such a uh, caught up in a disaster where all they had were the clothes on their back, and
Mm.
we had to set up processing to for new assignments back to the states. We had to have pay stations set up so they could get money, all of that. So that was quite an experience. Uh, and then ended up leaving Guam in August of 1992. Went to Langley Air Force Base in Hampton, Virginia. I was on a security staff for Air Combat Command. Was there 2 years. Retired in October of 1994.
So
So
Terry, how many years was that total in the Air Force?
that was a total of 22 years from 1972 to 1994, and really some of the I guess best years of my life. He gave uh, a young man from Central Florida the opportunity to grow, get a lot of experience into a mature man. So made friends that I still have, still communicate with. Uh, Never made to Europe, but got to go to in the Pacific. Got to go to Australia twice, South Korea, Japan. So most people wanted to get to Hawaii once. I think I've been there 4 or 5 times. So uh, lived on the West Coast, North, South. So I've had opportunity to get around.
All right. So you all have met my big cousin, who is my uncle. He's my cousin, but in my head, he's my uncle. And as a child, I really did think he was my uncle because he's not that much younger than my mom. Um, and I love Terry, y'all. This is my cousin who sends me books and articles to read. So you think I'm a nerd? I get it, honest. It's in the blood. It's in the bloodline. And this is my first cousin. So Terry, the reason why I have you on here today is to talk about um, what was released last week, what was reported and decided by the new administration last week, President Trump's administration, regarding the Tuskegee Airmen and their legacy being taught um, in the United States Air Force. I guess I don't want to say academy, but when people are coming into the Air Force being taught about the Tuskegee Airmen. Tell me a little bit about that decision. And then from there, tell me your thoughts on it.
Well, I guess the people who made the initial decision, whether consciously or out of fear, for whatever reason, they thought the history of the Tuskegee Airmen had to do something with diversity, equity, inclusion. Probably the closest I could get to that would be they were teaching, and this course was actually taught at basic training for new airmen just coming into the Air Force, where they give them a broad range of the history of the United States Air Force. So the history of the Tuskegee Airmen is about the United States Air Force and flying. Now, granted, during World War II, it was the Army Air Force. The Air Force didn't actually come into existence till a few years later after a couple of things happened. The Air Force came into existence, and also President Truman signed an executive order integrating the military. So the Tuskegee Airmen during World War II, they were an all African American unit, which actually most of the generals in the Army or in the military really they didn't want to train black pilots. And then once the program was set up, they were really did everything to try to get them to fail. But the stipulations, even the qualifications for those gentlemen to get in, most of them had already been flying, and they had taken the entrance exam before, and they made them take it over when they got there for their initial training to start. The first thing they had to do was take the test over again, which I think when they took it over, nobody got less than 85% on the test. So these were
Except
exceptionally smart young men, and my children's grandfather was one of those men. His name was Wilson V. Eagleson Jr. So I have had personal contact with a Tuskegee Airman, and even after they finished the initial group, finished their training, they weren't allowed to go into the World War II theater until President Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, came. She got a ride in one of the planes, and she pitched the fit on why these trained pilots weren't going. And to go back to the DEI part, whether you think of it diversity, equity, inclusion, or you think of it as affirmative action, really all those programs really were put in place just to give, whether it's African Americans, whether it was females, Hispanics, to give minorities an opportunity to get them in the door. And I think that's what most people don't get. Once they got in the door, they still had to do the work. The curriculum wasn't changed for their pilot training. One of the most asinine things I ever heard was, as this whole DEI thing came up, somebody mentioned that, if they got on the airplane and saw a black pilot, they think they got there only because of DEI. Flight training, pilot training is some of the most rigorous training you can ever get, and it's accelerated training because they want to test your every limit. I learned the operation and theory of radar in less than actually in a few weeks, and that was because they want to see how fast you can catch up and catch on to things, how you retain, how you react under pressure, because you're going to be flying a multi-million-dollar aircraft. So they could have taught radar over 2 semesters in a college setting, but that's not the purpose of that accelerated training. So it doesn't matter whether you're black, white, purple, green, or polka dot. If you get through the United States Air Force, the U.S. Navy flight training, and you earn your wings, you are very qualified. And just to top that off, a lot of people have seen the movie Top Gun. When the United States Air Force had their first ever Top Gun competition, soldiers from the 332nd Fighter Group, the Tuskegee Airmen, won. And that they weren't just competing against black pilots; they were competing against the best pilots the Air Force had to offer at that time, and they won. So I'm not sure whether we're going through this because, well, I do know people feel threatened, or either they're trying to regain some perceived power that they think that was lost. Supposedly, jobs may have been taken away from a certain group. So, but you talk about meritocracy. The reason that you have it, that old system of the good old boy system, is because either through nepotism or somebody knew somebody that knew somebody, that person got the job. I mean, the NFL is a classic example of coaches being recycled and recycled. And, even with the Rooney rule in place now, you still have the same thing. So I'll shut up and let you ask me some more questions.
No, 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 you're fine because that was good. That was rich hearing about the flight training radar. So, let me ask you this. Let's go back a little bit. Tell me about maybe a lesson or a story that you learned from your uh, father-in-law, who's now passed away, Wilson V. Eagleson Jr., who was a Tuskegee Airman. Tell us about lessons you learned from him and the stories you learned from him, and why those stories and lessons should be shared with those who serve in our U.S. Air Force, United States Air Force.
Well, I guess the most important thing is that for the young men that are going through that kind of training, even when I went through that training, what in the early '70s, so that was like 30 years after they came along.
Mhm.
The things that they had to put up with was that, and in my time was nowhere where close. I knew if I did the work and competed and I got through and I passed the test, both on the ground and simulators and in the air, I was going to get through. They weren't necessarily guaranteed that, because they did pass, and initially they were still thought not to be good enough.
Mhm.
Now, one of the differences is when I went through my flight training, I was competing with, actually, I had some international officers, because in my class, there was a German guy there on site. There were people from Egypt and different African countries. So you knew you were competing against the best. I mean, there were guys in my class that went to the United States Air Force Academy, Boston College, University of Michigan, and even when I went to officer training school, you had to put your hometown and name of college on the door. And I had my uh, officer trainee, Coney, Lakeland, Florida A&M University on the door,
Yeah,
right next to all the others.
HBCU. Let's just be
Yes,
clear.
that's
HBCU
it.
was presented. That's right.
That's right. And it was this perception that, if you went through a HBCU, and that name wasn't that acronym wasn't used back then, that you weren't as smart.
Mm,
So I always had a chip on my shoulder, like I had to prove
okay.
something. And I'd made up my mind from day one that it wasn't so much about me being top of my class, but I was going to graduate and I was going to get through. The only way I didn't get through, that they were going to put me out, because I wasn't going to quit.
Okay. So, what in talking to um, what was his rank? What was Eagleson's rank when he left the military?
Well, he was a first lieutenant, and
Okay.
the other part about a lot of the Tuskegee Airmen
Mm-hmm.
was that after the war, they got involuntarily discharged. They did a reduction in force since the war was over. Uh, they didn't. It was thought that they didn't need as many pilots. Now,
So they forced them out.
yeah, they forced them out, or either they had to come back in as uh, enlisted guys, and he went back in as enlisted, as a aircraft mechanic. Now, he would tell the story that he may have been on a flight with air crew, that airplane that he was assigned to. They actually let him get in a seat and fly the plane. So,
Mm,
because he had a chance to wear his still could wear his pilot wings, because he earned those. They couldn't take that away, even though uh, he had to step back. So there was a lot of qualified pilots, black pilots, after World War II that didn't get to fly anymore. Now,
okay.
there were some that went on, that made it through to Korea and moved on from there.
All right. So what were they discouraged from having a military career unless they were willing to um step down, so to speak?
Yeah, some of them were, and and some of them after that time they got out and got in civilian life.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Because usually when we as civilians learn about the Tuskegee Airmen, all we know is that they fought in war and they flew these planes and they were so exceptional and they blew, they blew people away in the United States and abroad. But we don't really hear about who they were and like their humanity beyond serving in the United States military as these airmen, right?
Yeah.
And
Well,
we almost make them like they're like characters in our head, but we don't know them individually. So that's why I thought it was so awesome that, growing up, always knowing that my cousins, their grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman, knowing that my Aunt D, her father was a Tuskegee Airman. So that legacy is so big to me, but we don't get to hear those stories about who they were, who those men were individually.
yeah, and they. I mean, not just just intellect and
He's frozen.
the 40s and doing that segregation and Jim Crow period. It was very common for a white man to call a fully grown black man boy.
Hmm.
So that was no different in those times during World War II and for the Tuskegee Airmen. So they had to demand that if somebody was a captain, an enlisted white airman had to address him as captain and salute.
Mm.
So and they went through that fight.
They went
So
through.
yeah,
As just as an aside, as a member of the Air Force, did you experience that type of behavior? Not being called boy, but where someone who was enlisted did not want to salute you as a high-ranking officer in the United States Air Force, ultimately becoming a lieutenant colonel yourself.
there may have been one or two times that I passed someone and they didn't, and I just made a comment. Uh, "Oh, you're not saluting today? Oh, excuse me, sir, I didn't notice." So sometimes people would look through you
Mm,
and either not recognize the rank on your shoulder or on your hat. They may just see your face and automatically make an assumption.
yeah.
I've had people ask me when they found out I was in the Air Force, "Well, how many stripes do you have?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, you're a sergeant or what? Don't you have stripes?" I said, "No, I'm officer. I'm a captain or I'm a major." And they said, "Oh."
Yeah.
Now the flip side of that, I've been at some bases. Say we may have flew into some place. For instance, I think we landed in Guam the first time we flew over there from Michigan, and I opened the hatch and I was the first one to get off. And there happened to be a black crew chief there, uh, accepting the airplane, and he looked at me and he kind of smiled and he saluted like he was happy to see me. Or I've been, and they said, "Oh, we don't see many black officers in flight suits." So probably during most of my time in the Air Force, around 5% of all the officer corps was black, but
Oh,
less than 1% of that 5% were in aviation. So it was, unique thing for most people to see, black aviators,
okay.
even between the 70s and 90s.
Okay. So let's transition. So you retired 30 years ago, give or take, right?
Right.
Um, to have committed your much of your life's work in the Air Force and to come across the news report last week, what were your first thoughts when you heard about them pulling the lessons about the Tuskegee Airmen from the training that airmen learn?
Well, my first thought, this is asinine. That they've gone way overboard with this. Now, to be fair, I actually just saw an article that came up this morning where the Secretary of Defense has ordered that both the film on the Tuskegee Airmen and the film and history of
The women.
female aviators during World War II be reinstated in the program. So that's why I said earlier that maybe it was taken down either through fear or someone not understanding.
That this
The
isn't DEI. This
no,
is
it's not DEI at all.
history.
It's American military history.
Yeah, US military
Yeah,
history, plain and
yeah,
simple.
yeah.
So
So just nothing different than the invasion on D-Day or uh, the Navy SEAL and the units that went into Pakistan and got uh, Bin Laden when President Obama was president and commander in chief.
yeah,
It's military history.
yeah. So I come from an Air Force family, right? Both maternal and fraternal side, right? What are your words of wisdom that you give young people? Because that's one thing that I regret that I did not do it after college. I really should have done the JAG program. Should have listened to my daddy. But what is one piece of advice you give those who are interested in either joining the U.S. Armed Forces or specifically joining the Air Force? Do you try to push them towards the Air Force? But what kind of words of advice do you give? And as same to those individuals who are interested in the military, what kind of advice do you offer parents who are wanting to push their children towards the military, especially in a time such as this?
Well, first the first thing I tell uh, parents or anybody that ask about my military career, it, there's a perception that once you get in the military, you can stay as long as you want. And what I explained to them that it's an up or out program. Things are
Mm,
very competitive in the military. You run across very competitive guys. Everybody wants to be better than the next. So you don't just get in the military and stay as long as you want. Once you get in, you have to continue to advance. There's a series of professional military education courses you have to take. Uh, they're also strong on getting advanced degrees. Like I said, I got in the officer program, and one of the different things is that you have to have a college degree to get into the officer program. Now, there are three ways to become an officer in the United States Air Force, and well, military period. You can go to one of the academies, the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, or U.S. Military Academy in West Point, New York. Or you can do ROTC at the college level, or if you went in enlisted, they have what's called a officer training program. But in order
mhm.
for a person that has been an enlisted person, man or woman, to get in that program, they have to uh, get their college degree. Because again, as I said earlier, all officers have their degree, and you will find most senior officers have master's degrees and some have PhDs. So that's
Yeah.
that's just part of the program. So
Terry, can you flip your camera? Because we're looking at your garage. There
okay,
you go.
okay.
You
So
had to like people.
so I tell parents, if the kid may have not have been super into school, or you think their grades weren't well enough to get in college, have them talk to a recruiter, uh, and the kid could have been an athlete, and he may have been a great athlete, but he didn't fit the size criteria for major university, Power Five, even D2. But the
Mm-hmm.
military likes high school kids that were in athletics or excel in athletics. They may be a little undersized, but because of those skills and discipline you learn through participating in athletics, that
Mm-hmm.
will carry you a long ways in the military. You know, I ran track in high school. I participated in swim meets when I was a kid. So, all of us did things. We didn't have video games and cell phones, so we had to get out of the house. Or if I didn't get out of the house, my mom would find something for me to do. So
I bet you.
we'd set up during the Olympic time. We'd set up around the block. We'd have our own Olympics. That's how competitive we were. So the military really looks for kids that are competitive. If they do well on their exams, the sky's the limit for
Mm-hmm. Um, Kid wants to go into the Air Force. What do you tell them? Or a kid comes to you, say one of the kids from the local community. You do a lot of work at home. They come and let you know, Mr. Coney, I am um, leaving to go to the Air Force. I leave, I don't know, in 6 weeks. What do you tell that young person before they go?
I'll
Because
ask them, and
before
I
you
said,
had that conversation.
yeah. Well, at first I said, are you sure this is what you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
Or I talked about the athlete thing before. Well, athletes are used to coaches demanding or trying to pull the best out of them,
Mm-hmm.
and coaches may get a little their voice may go up a little bit, so they may be used to getting yelled at. Well, when you go in the military, especially when you're going through basic training, when the drill sergeant yells at you, or they're demanding, or they get on you about something, it's really just a test to see how much stress you can take or put up with. Can you work under demands where you have to get something done at a certain time, and everything is on the line for you to get that done. And so you're actually being tested. So in the Air Force, you go through the physical fitness training and obstacle course and running and all those kind of things. Probably not as much as you do going through Marines or Army, because uh, their mission is for that. In the Air Force, everything everything around supports the flying mission for the most part. So really, once you get through the basic training and you go through your academic training for whatever field you're going in, things kind of settle down a lot.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. I appreciate you for joining us. I'm going to have you back on, but I will see you next month when I come home.
All right, there, my cousin.
All right. Love you. And thank you all for tuning in. If you have questions that you would like to speak with Lieutenant Colonel, retired Lieutenant Colonel Coney, he is the president. You still the president of the
Yep.
NAACP, NAACP, Lakeland, Florida?
One more turn.
One more time. Ooh, baby, because that's the most expensive volunteer job. Ooh, But we thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. You take care. Have a good day.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.